This is one of the areas in which the board can test itself. Quality and timeliness of information. 7 days before the meeting is what the code is suggesting. And so for those boards who come to meetings and are handed papers for which they must take important decisions, we know that that is in conflict with the code. The marshalling of resources, the stakeholder relations management, the review of executive management, the review of board committees, and the management of external relationships. I suggest that the measurement of the performance of the board should not omit any of those if it is going to be accurate and adequate. So in conclusion, I would say, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm saying here is let's ask ourselves, what is corporate governance for? It is to help us to deliver the results, the expectations of multiple stakeholders equitably and to the best of our capacity. Who is involved in corporate governance? Who are those who should take an interest in this code that is being launched today? All parties to corporate governance, and we've made a list of them. Therefore, this is an all parties activity, even though the board is the driver of performance. The chairman of SEC has already referred to the fact that we need to audit regularly the way that we are complying with the code, and also even to review the code itself from time to time to see if it is still meeting our needs and our requirements. Finally, may I say to all who are going to be involved in implementing this code, that of those three platforms for taking decisions, the legal, the professional, and the moral, let's focus on the moral, because even in implementing a code of governance, there can be a vast difference between compliance and commitment. You can only be committed to the implementation of this code if you believe that it is a positive, value-adding instrument to the delivery of corporate performance. So I urge that we implement the code on that basis and bring ourselves to what the chairman has described as perhaps the best capital market, not just in Africa, but everywhere else, not forgetting that we are accountable to each other, to the whole economy, for that future, which is our vision. I thank you very much.
For those of us who are in the audience who may be unaware or who may have forgotten that Dr. Christopher Kolade was the man who signed the Code of Business Integrity, the first of such in Nigeria in 1997. Please, let's give him another round of applause, please. Now we have the pleasure to review the code, the new Code of Corporate Governance. The man who will do this for us at this event is Kennedy Agbekan, the Director of Legal Services and the Secretary to the Board of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and as well the Chairman of the SEC Rules Committee. Mr. Kennedy Agbekan, please, to the podium to review the Code of Corporate Governance.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to stand by already established protocol. Ladies and gentlemen, the Code of Corporate Governance we are presenting today is the result of the work of the A.B. Mahmood Committee, as well as the input of stakeholders in an effort by the SEC to review the 2003 Atero-Peterside Code. The present code is very comprehensive and covers a wide range of subjects which are linked to good corporate practices in public companies. The code, which is aimed at ensuring the highest standards of transparency, accountability, and good corporate governance, applies to all public companies, especially public quoted companies and companies seeking to raise funds from the market through issuance of securities or seeking listing by introduction. Now, the principles guiding the application of the new code are the understanding that they are not a rigid set of rules, but a dynamic document aimed at facilitating sound corporate practices and behavior, and the primary responsibility for ensuring compliance with the code rests with the board of directors of the company, while shareholders should encourage or, where necessary, demand compliance by their companies. Now, the new code has 9 parts. Part A deals with application of the code. Part B, the board of directors. Part C, relationship with stakeholders. And then you have relationship with shareholders. You have risk management and audit, accountability and reporting, communication, code of ethics, and of course, interpretation. Now, the key provisions of the code are as follows. I will just take them quickly. Now, one, you have responsibilities of the board. The code spells out the responsibilities and duties of the board. And according to the code, the board is accountable and responsible for the performance and affairs of the company. This requires it to define the company's strategic goals and ensuring that resources are effectively deployed to achieve those goals. And then, of course, it's also required to oversee the effective performance of management and ensures that good corporate governance are entrenched in the company. Of course, they are also to formulate and manage the risk management framework and ensure the integrity of financial reports, among others. And then the code also deals with composition of the board. The code requires that the board of a company should be of sufficient size relative to the scale and complexity of its business and operations. However, membership shall not be less than 5. And of course, the board should also have a mix of executive and non-executive. While among the non-executives, who should form the majority of the board, there should be at least one independent director. The position of the chairman, who should be a non-executive, should be separate from that of the chief executive officer. The purpose of this is to have more independent and dispassionate views on the affairs of the company and ensure proper oversight of the management. Of course, the code also requires that the remunerations of the executive directors be disclosed in the company's annual report and that they should not be involved in the determination of their remunerations. On multiple directorship, while the code does not place any limit on the number of concurrent directorship a director of a company may hold, it, however, enjoins the board to give careful consideration to other obligations and commitments of nominees in assessing their suitability for appointment to the board. The reason for this is that concurrent service on too many boards may interfere with the ability of an individual to effectively discharge his responsibilities as a director. The code also focused on family and interlocking directorship. Under this new code, not more than 2 members of the same family should sit on the board of a public company. This is to ensure the independence of the board, and companies are also enjoined to discourage cross-membership of the board of 2 or more companies. Of course, these are aimed at safeguarding objectivity and the independence of the board. Then the code also enjoins a company to work with committees. So apart from the statutory requirement for an audit committee, the new code requires all public companies to establish a risk management committee and a governance / remuneration committee. The risk management committee is to assist the board in its oversight of the risk profile, risk management framework, and the risk reward strategy as determined by the board. While the governance so remuneration committee is to establish the criteria for board and board committees membership, as well as a review of candidates' qualification and any potential conflict of interest. It also makes recommendations on the compensation structure for executive directors and periodically evaluates the skills, knowledge, and experience required of the board. And then for meetings of the board, the code requires boards to meet at least once every quarter to ensure effective performance of its oversight function and the monitoring of management's performance. Directors are enjoined to attend at least 2/3 of board meetings. And then for appointment to the board is required under the new code to develop a written and transparent procedure for appointment of board members. The biographical information of proposed directors should be provided to shareholders so that this will enable them to have the necessary information on these prospective board members in order to take a decision whether or not to support their appointment. And then one other key area that the code focused on is remuneration. Under this code, companies are required to develop a comprehensive remuneration policy for directors and senior management. The policy should, among others, define the criteria and mechanism for determining levels of remuneration and the frequency of review and the process for determining executive and non-executive compensation and the extent to which executive directors' reward is linked to corporate and individual performance. Then the other issue which the code has focused on is performance evaluation of the board. The board is required under this new code to establish a system for the evaluation of its performance and that of its committees, the chairman and the individual directors. While the chairman oversees the annual evaluation of the performance of the chief executive officer is required to perform an annual evaluation of the executive directors based on agreed criteria and performance indicators. And then conflict of interest. The code provides that companies must adopt a policy to guide the board and individual directors on conflict of interest situations. Under this principle, directors are to promptly disclose any real or potential conflict of interest regarding matters before the board. Directors with such conflict of interest situation are not expected to participate in any deliberations or voting on the matter at the board meeting. The orientation or training for directors. The new code requires the board to establish a formal orientation and other training programs for new directors, and it is mandatory for all directors to participate in relevant continuing education programs to update their knowledge and assist them in the effective discharge of their duties. And again, under this, the codes, directors are required to be presented for re-election at least once every 3 years, so that at least they can have a consistent tenure. And of course, for non-executive directors, it is recommended that they should stay for a longer period on the board. And then on terms and conditions of service, the code requires that terms and conditions of service of directors should be in writing and issued in the form of a contract. This should, among others, include the terms for appointments, remuneration, explanation of the duties of care, skill, and diligence, as well as other responsibilities of directors, the requirement for certain disclosures relating to material interest in the company, and of course, a copy of the board code of conduct, which should be given to every director of a company. And then, of meetings of shareholders, the new code requires that the board should ensure that all shareholders are treated fairly and given equal access to information about the company. Shareholders are also allowed free discussions during meetings and sufficient time to participate and contribute effectively at the meetings. And of course, the venue of meetings should be such that it is accessible to all shareholders. In other words, a company should assess the spread of its shareholders, so you don't fix a meeting in London where you know that not many of the shareholders can afford to attend such meetings. And then, of course, the code also looked at the role of shareholders associations. And here the board is required to ensure that dealings with shareholder associations by companies is transparent and in line with the Code of Conduct for Shareholders Associations as prescribed by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And then our relationship with other stakeholders, the code requires companies to address sustainability issues, such as paying attention to stakeholders like employees, host community, and consumers. And then, of course, to pay attention to other social and ethical issues in this community, such as corruption and then health-related issues. And then risk management and audit. Under this provision, the board is given the responsibility to oversee the establishment of a management framework that defines the company's risk policy, risk appetite, and risk limits. The board is also responsible for the process of risk management, and this should form its opinion on the effectiveness of the process. The board is also to ensure that the risk management framework is integrated into the day-to-day operations of the business.